Here are the notes on laminating wood or bending wood. Laminating wood is the process of bending and gluing thin strips of wood to form a curve. Uses there making curved chairs or building curved church roofs. So I've just a couple of pictures of a couple of examples of these. This is an example of a laminated beam. So thin strips of wood that have been bent to form a curve. Very, very strong, and they can take massive amounts of weight, so they'll hold up roofs. In furniture, you'd be talking something more like this. So the side of that chair was a series of thin strips of wood and then bent in a former. And then another example of a bigger version again is another roof or a bridge. And the roof of the bridge have all been done by laminated beams. So just to go quickly then through the actual notes themselves and the process of doing this. To make a laminated beam, first thing you have to do is you have to cut thin strips of timber. So you take your piece of wood, put it on the bandsaw, and you cut it up into 3 to 5 mil, so between 3 and 5 millimeter thick, so that they're easy enough to bend. Number two then is you need to prepare. You have to make a former. So out of plywood or MDF, you cut exactly the shape you want. So if we wanted our curve here, you cut exactly the shape, and you have two sections to the form. You have a male section and a female section, and they clamp together. It's really important that you leave a gap between the two. So if you want to make a chair leg, and the chair is going to have an 18 millimeter thick leg when it's finished, you have to cut a gap of exactly 18 millimeters between the two formers. That means that when it clamps together, your piece of wood will fit perfectly in between the two formers. We come along then. We don't always have to do it, but sometimes we need to steam the pieces of wood. Steaming the wood softens them up and makes them really, really, really flexible. And all that involves is we make a box out of plywood, we boil up water in a metal can, and then we just have a pipe going into our steam chest. So what it means is we've got this box full of really hot steam. We put the laminates into it, and then you can leave them from anywhere between 20 minutes to an hour depending on the size of the laminates. You have a vent to let out excess steam, and then you just have a bucket here which will catch the water. So when the water cools or the steam cools inside the box, it's going to condense and it's going to drip out. So the laminates go into the steam chest, leave them in there until they're nice and soft and flexible. Step 4 then, we take our laminates and we put them back into our formers. So here's the two formers that we prepared earlier, and you clamp them in place. So either G clamps or sash clamps, it doesn't matter, depending on the job you're doing, and you put the laminates into the clamp, no glue, and you let them dry out. So they're not being glued yet. You're putting them in just to flex them or bend them to the shape you want. This will stop them cracking later. As you can see there, they're left to dry for 1 week. After the week and the laminates have dried out, you take the laminates out. So the laminates are taken out, glue is added, and then the laminates are put back into the former to set. So you take your laminates out, spread glue and a generous amount of glue all over the laminates, and then you put it straight back into the former exactly as it is here, and you clamp it back in place, and then your laminate's set. The very last step then, and you'll see it in one of the videos, is you have to plane up the edges. The glue or the glue will ooze out through the edges of the laminates and it'll set. So you need to plane them down and sand them to clean up the edges of the laminates. Last part then is just the advantages and disadvantages of this method. So the big advantages, you can do really complex curves. As you've seen with the chair leg, the curve is really, really intricate or complex. The laminates are very, very strong, so they can take a lot of weight. So for a chair, somebody sitting on the chair, or on a bigger version, a roof or a bridge, they're extremely strong. And the last thing, there's very little waste produced when you do this. So you're using thin strips of wood and you're not producing any waste. The disadvantages, it's very time consuming. You have to prepare the laminates, you have to build a steam chest if you don't already have one, you have to cut a former to the shape. So every curve that you bend, if it's different, you need a new former. So you need a specific former for each curve you're going to bend. That takes a lot of time. And then you've got the work in steaming it and gluing it. And then the edges can look unsightly. So the edges don't look like a solid piece of wood. When you look at the edge of the piece of timber, you'll see lines between the laminates. So you can pick out that the piece of wood is laminates and it's not solid natural wood.